Hello everybody, Donlinedude here, and welcome to my video reaction for Doctor Who, The Magician's Apprentice, and The Witch's Familiar. Okay, this reaction is probably going to feel a bit all over the place, a bit disjointed, because honestly, it's been really difficult for me to form an opinion on this this story. That's kind of why I waited until The Witch's Familiar was broadcast so I could react to the whole story rather than just one part. It's been really difficult for me to condense my opinion down to just this story without my feelings about it extending back to my feelings on just the general direction of Doctor Who from like Series 8 onwards. I've just really not been behind what Stephen Moffat has been doing lately with Doctor Who, and the main reason for that is because I don't think even he knows what he wants to do with it anymore. Trilby actually made the point in his reaction to The Magician's Apprentice last week that Stephen Moffat just feels creatively tapped out right now, and I kind of have to agree. I'm just seeing so many tropes that Moffat established during his first couple of years as showrunner being recycled lately, and it's really getting on my nerves as a viewer because there's no longer any enthusiasm behind it. It just feels tired in a lot of places. I felt that Series 8 was actually quite weak, especially from a character standpoint, though I didn't dislike all of the episodes. I liked Deep Breath, even though I thought it did not need to be 85 minutes long. I liked Robot of Sherwood. I really liked Time Heist. That was probably the best episode of the series, in my opinion. And I kind of liked Flatline, although I think I need to watch that episode a couple more times before I can really form an opinion on that too. But overall, I thought the tone in a lot of the episodes was quite flat. I didn't think the rift between Clara and the Doctor felt organic. I thought Clara's whole plotline through that series was really contradictory to her character in the previous series. I know some people try and say that Clara didn't have a character there, but I disagree. I liked Clara from Series 7. I don't like the Clara from Series 8 as much. And the series finale, Darkwater and Death in Heaven, in particular, was abysmal. It was easily the worst series finale that Doctor Who has had since it came back in 2005. Good news, though, regarding this story. It's not as bad as that series finale. That was the worst story that Stephen Moffat has written. This is not the worst, though. It's got its problems, believe me, it has. But there was quite a bit of stuff here that I did like, that I actually could appreciate Moffat for doing. So I'll start with some of the good stuff. This episode definitely opens very well. I enjoyed the pre-credit sequence on Skaro. I liked the really kind of warlike atmosphere, and I like how the sequence built up to the Doctor realizing that the child he was trying to save from the handmine field was Davros. I wasn't completely surprised that it was Davros. I'd heard rumors that there was going to be Davros was going to appear in child form in the premiere episode. So I wasn't completely surprised, but it did surprise me a little bit because I wasn't completely sure if it was true. I also really liked the fan service, not just in the pre-credit sequence with all the callbacks to Genesis of the Daleks with the mishmash of technology and the reference to that line that Harry Sullivan had. I think it's referencing him. It might not be. It might be a happy accident. I don't know. But there's that line in Genesis of the Daleks where he's saying, "Oh, at this point they'll be finishing up with bows and arrows," and you have a guy using a bow and arrow against a plane shooting lasers. I can appreciate that as a Doctor Who fan. But there was also the fan service where we saw Colony Sarf, which was like an agent of Davros, going from like planet to planet looking for the Doctor, and we see him go to the Maldivarium from series 5 and 6 of New Doctor Who. We see him go to the Shadow Proclamation, which was referenced throughout the Russell T Davies era and actually appeared in The Stolen Earth in series 4, and then finally Khan. Now I know some people are gonna like geek out most of all over Khan because that's a callback to the Brain of Morbius storyline from the 4th Doctor's era, but I most of all I kind of geeked out over the Shadow Proclamation because I've just got a real nostalgia right now for David Tennant's era, because David Tennant is my favourite Doctor, of course, and just seeing stuff like that referenced is really cool. I like I like that this is the way Moffat chose to open it, because it reminds us how big the Doctor's universe is, and I think that was a problem in the last series, that with all the recurring characters like the Paternoster gang, it was kind of making the Doctor's universe smaller rather than bigger. So going back to things we haven't seen in a while is really good, I think. It's when we get to Earth that things start to take a bit of a nosedive, really, because from that point onwards, it just pretty much most of the Magician's Apprentice is set up, really. Just getting the characters together, finding out what some of them have been up to, and just getting them into position to be on Skaro, for the Doctor to be locked in with Davros, and for Missy and Clara to be at the mercy of the Daleks. We had that whole the planes have stopped thing on Earth, and that was pretty much forgotten about as soon as Misty and Clara went off to find the Doctor. So it just came across as like just a really kind of showy and empty thing in the episode. It just felt like it was there just because this was the premiere episode, to mark the fact that the series was back. I think this is a good time to seg into talking about the characters. I'll start with the Doctor. Now, I really want to like Peter Capaldi's Doctor. I really do. I was actually quite behind Capaldi getting cast in the first place. I liked that Moffat actually went for an older Doctor. I thought it would allow him to bring something new to the role. I actually liked his outfit as well when it was first unveiled, although if I'm pressed, I actually prefer his look in this story, because the kind of the space hipster look befits Capaldi more than the magician look, and it's even like a nice little bit of continuity from Patrick Troughton's space hobo look that was in the classic series. But just like the general direction of the series, I just don't think Moffat knows what he wants to do with the 12th Doctor, and therefore neither does Peter Capaldi. He always as much as the actors bring a lot of themselves to the role of the Doctor, they can only really do that if the writers lay out a basis for the incarnation's character, and that's why, in my opinion, Capaldi just comes across as quite restrained a lot of the time. He's not really got a chance for any of his natural charisma to shine through. Because I like Capaldi as an actor. I liked him a lot in the thick of it. He's hysterical in that. But he never has a chance to really kind of bring any natural charisma through to the role, because there just doesn't seem to be anything there. The only thing that it kind of is persisting about the 12th Doctor is that he's ambiguous. He's morally ambiguous. We don't know what kind of a person he is, whether he's a good man or not, which really got on my nerves, that whole am I a good man thing. Now that worked for Deep Breath, the whole moral ambiguity thing. That worked because that was the first story for the 12th Doctor, so it made sense that you're not quite sure of what kind of Doctor he is, but it doesn't work for just moving forward with the character. You need to establish some sort of base traits, and him telling people to shut up, although it is a funny catchphrase, that's just a superficial thing. Superficial little quirks do not a character make. I actually felt like Moffat was trying to retcon elements of the 12th Doctor's character in this story, because the acidity from the previous series is pretty much gone for the most part, which I'm not really that bothered about. I kind of felt it came off as mean-spirited rather than witty. But once again, I just don't feel like there really is much to the 12th Doctor's character aside from the ambiguity, and that really just distances me as a viewer from the 12th Doctor rather than endearing me to him as an incarnation of the Doctor. I have to say the Doctor did overall get some good moments with Davros, and I'll touch on that a bit when I talk about Davros. Before that, I'm going to talk about what was probably the nadir of the story for me, and that's Missy. I will say two positive things about Missy before I rip the character to shreds. Michelle Gomez is really throwing herself into this role. She's giving her all, and her performance is actually really good. She comes across as rather creepy, insane, and weird. I think a good example would be when she's locked up in the Dalek cell with the Doctor and Clara, and she's just sort of swiveling on the spot going, ah, ah, ah. That actually creeped me out a little bit. The second positive thing I will say is that her personality it feels more well defined. Moffat actually seems to know what he wants to do with Missy. The problem with that, though, is that, first of all, Missy just doesn't feel like the Master in any way, shape, or form. There's no underlying base traits of her personality that link her up to the previous incarnations of the Master. And second of all, based on this story, Moffat just doesn't seem to get the Doctor and the Master dynamic. We have that moment where Clara questions how Missy can be the Doctor's best friend because she keeps trying to kill him, and Missy's response is, he keeps trying to kill me. That's blatantly contradictory to, like, years worth of Doctor and Master stories. The only time the Doctor has really tried to kill the Master was the last time they met in Death in Heaven. So really, that comment just makes Missy come across as incredibly obnoxious, and she's got plenty of other lines like that in the story. There's also that point where she says Clara basically isn't the Doctor's friend, she's the puppy. And those lines wouldn't be so irritating if there was only a point where the Doctor and Clara would call her on it, or at the very least offer a form of witty comeback. But that never happens. Instead, it just feels like the dynamic between the Doctor, Missy, and Clara is one-sided in Missy's favour, and that just doesn't ring true to me, especially where Clara's concerned. Clara, and by extension any of the modern Who companions, would have bitten Missy's head off regarding that comment. This transitions me over to Clara. Like I said before, Clara's character arc in Series 8 was so contradictory to her character in Series 7. Her relationship with Danny Pink in particular just didn't work, mainly thanks to the Danny Pink character being an utter waste of space. It seems we have another Stephen Moffat trope here where he retcons certain characters' personalities. He did it with the 12th Doctor in this story, and he did it with Clara in Series 8. All of a sudden she was a far more bossy character than she was in Series 7, which I guess was meant to suit her new occupation as a school teacher, which just, again, did not suit her character at all. But regarding what she actually did in this story, honestly, Clara was such a reactionary presence here, and that's just not a good thing for the companion character to be. It's especially awkward because the titles of both of these episodes refer to Clara, the Magician's Apprentice, the Witch's Familiar, because she's paired with Missy for the second one, and Missy is obviously meant to be the witch. But she's just so superfluous to the events of the story. She hardly does anything that really affects the story. Like, the most she does is get Missy into the Dalek city as a hostage, a supposed hostage, and find the Doctor in the Magician's Apprentice. That's like all she does, and that's two things. Missy actually does more in the story than Clara does. Several people have mentioned Clara and Missy's unusual dynamic in The Witch's Familiar, and I assume that by unusual they mean uncomfortable, because that's honestly how I felt watching the two of them. The thing is, Missy did a lot of horrible things to Clara in the Series 8 finale, so to have her be at Missy's mercy throughout most of The Witch's Familiar just felt really uncomfortable to me, especially because Clara never gets any kind of payback against Missy. In fact, Missy just sort of gets away at the end with no kind of negative consequences at all. She even outwits the Daleks at the end. I mean, I'm assuming she'll crop up at some point in the series finale, but really, her exit here was just completely underwhelming. Clara's presence as a whole in this story was pretty wasted, and it's especially disappointing because Jenna Coleman has confirmed that this is her last series of Doctor Who. She'll be leaving at the end of this, I assume. I'm just hoping that by the end of the series, Clara will have had more to do and she'll have been allowed to be the fun character she was when she was originally introduced. Otherwise, she's just set to go out not with a bang but with a whimper. It's not all doom and gloom though, because I'm about to talk about what I consider to be the strongest aspect of this two-parter, and that's Davros and his part in the story. Stephen Moffat has definitely struggled with the Daleks recently. A lot of the decisions he's made regarding them haven't been very popular, such as the mass mind wipe of every Dalek in Asylum of the Daleks, which was practically reversed by the 2013 Christmas special, and the new Paradigm Daleks in Victory of the Daleks, who, by the way, have been completely phased out. They didn't even show up here. And especially in this episode, it feels like Moffat sometimes tries to tack on certain things to the Daleks to make them scarier, such as the human Daleks in Asylum of the Daleks, and the Dalek sewer, and the hand mine field that were featured here. which I feel is unnecessary, because I think the Daleks are scary enough on their own. That's why they're such long-lasting enemies of the Doctor and such iconic parts of the show. But if there's one aspect of the Daleks that Moffat gets down to a T, it's Davros. Davros here is brilliant. The dialogue he has is excellent, and it's the one part of the story for me where there's real enthusiasm behind his dialogue, and maybe that's just because Julian Bleach gets the character so well that he can just deliver any kind of line that you give him. I was so pleased that they got Julian Bleach back and didn't even change the costume. He was basically looked exactly the same as he was in the series 4 finale. I was particularly impressed with how they managed to keep it under wraps, really. And that actually has me excited about the possibilities going forward, especially considering the rumours that have cropped up recently about David Tennant and Paul McGann potentially appearing alongside Peter Capaldi in the series finale. Because if they can keep Julian Bleach returning a secret, then they might even be able to keep David Tennant and Paul McGann returning a secret. But yeah, Davros had a lot of great moments here. I liked his philosophical debate with the Doctor over why compassion is wrong. I even liked the bit where Davros appeared to break down, and and the moment where he opened his eyes to look at the Doctor, which actually was a really seamless effect, because I had no idea that Davros had eyes. That actually caught me by surprise. And of course, the moment where it turned out that Davros was lying just to get the Doctor to give him regeneration energy, even though that makes no sense whatsoever. The whole idea about excess regeneration energy was established in the Christmas Invasion as only occurring within the first 15 hours of a Time Lord's regeneration cycle. I'm not quite aware of how long Peter Capaldi's Doctor has been around, but it's clearly for longer than 15 hours, so how on earth has he got all that regeneration energy? It was the same problem with Matt Smith healing River Song's hand with regeneration energy in The Angels Take Manhattan. But anyway, the plot twist in the end was really good, because we didn't want Davros to be too sympathetic. We want to remember that Davros for the megalomaniacal evil person that he is. But what I did like was the ambiguity, because there was a good kind of ambiguity here with Davros's so-called breakdown, because we don't quite know if he actually means what he says or not, and I think that really gives depth, because obviously it's a way of baiting the Doctor into giving him regeneration energy and keeping him around for a while. But for all we know, Davros could actually mean what he says, that he actually is happy for the Doctor now that the Doctor is no longer alone, which would suggest that Davros feels lonely for all of the pride he talks about having created this so-called master race in the Daleks. And I really like that, because there's that gives Davros a lot of depth in this episode, really. And then there was the final moments where we discovered that the Doctor actually did save Child Davros, and I actually thought that was a great way to end the story. Not because of the whole mercy thing, that just felt like a cheap platitude that Moffat tacked on at the end to give the story some kind of theme that wasn't really there. No, it was a great way to end the story, because it clarifies that Davros doesn't want the Doctor to admit that compassion is wrong because the Doctor didn't save him and he created therefore is responsible for Davros creating the Daleks. No, he wants the Doctor to admit that compassion is wrong because the Doctor saved him out of compassion, and Davros still wound up creating the Daleks. Even though Davros clearly thinks it was the right thing to do to create the Daleks, it galls him to think that the Doctor, one of his most hated enemies, saved him simply because he's a compassionate being. That really resonated with me, and for all of the bad stuff I've listed, this story did actually have a pretty good ending. I'm going to finish this reaction up by talking about just the more technical aspects of the episode, like the more sci-fi stuff and the direction. I actually liked the explanation for how Missy was able to avoid getting killed by the Cyberman gun in the Series 8 finale. It actually, once she kind of explained it, it made sense why she was able to use a vortex manipulator to escape. And it's kind of clever because Moffat's playing around with the name there, but it makes sense because it's called a vortex manipulator. It manipulates the energy of the time vortex, so therefore it should be able to manipulate the energy frequency of energy weapons. So that was good, even if the whole explanation laced with the Doctor escaping story just felt really drawn out. Sadly, I did discover another irritating Moffatism during Clara and Missy scenes. It's when Missy convinces Clara to hop in and pilot the Dalek casing, and we get the explanation that the Dalek casing system is able to convert positive affirmations such as "I love you" simply into the word "exterminate," and the Dalek weapons are powered by emotion. So when the Daleks, this is like actual dialogue, by the way. So when the Daleks are yelling "exterminate," they're not yelling it because they're filled with hate and rage towards all living things. They're yelling it because they're trying to reload their weapons. I'm going to quote Trilby again because he did a Facebook post about this, and I completely agree with him that explanation is 100 helpings of BS. It's needlessly complicated. It doesn't really adhere to any form of sense, even within the show's rules, and it actually devalues one of the more fundamental aspects of the Daleks, because in my opinion, part of what makes the Daleks so terrifying, so scary, is that they're so filled with hate and rage towards all living things, and exterminate is a way of reflecting that. I don't see this explanation lasting, though. I don't think it's going to stick very well with other Doctor Who fans. I imagine quite a few of them, as well as me, are annoyed by it. I am going to finish this reaction on a positive note, though, and that's that I really liked Hetty MacDonald's direction. In case anyone's watching this who isn't aware, MacDonald also directed Blink, which I think almost every Doctor Who fan considers to be one of the best Doctor Who stories ever done, and definitely perhaps Stephen Moffat's best story. MacDonald really gave the episodes a sense of scope, particularly the scene shot on Khan, the kind of regalness of the Shadow Proclamation, and I even like the way she shot the Doctor's entrance on the tank. For as cheesy as the electric guitar was, I liked the way it was shot, and also the Dalek sets were great. Like Skaro looked, the city on Skaro, if a bit isolated, looked magnificent. And the set design as well was very, very similar, I think, to the original designs that were in the Daleks' first appearance. So I appreciated the touch there. Anyway, that's my overall rather lengthy reaction to The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. I realise that I've come across as very critical in this video, and that might even lead some of you to think that I don't like Doctor Who, but the fact is I'm only this critical because I love Doctor Who. I think it has such a rich tapestry of characters, aliens, villains, planets, locations. The possibilities are just endless with Doctor Who, and in my opinion that's one of the main reasons it's such a great program. And I don't want people thinking that I'm hating on Stephen Moffat either. I've loved so many of Stephen Moffat's stories that he's written. The man has contributed some of the best storylines to Doctor Who ever. But there's no denying that his standard for storytelling has really slipped in the last couple of years, and I have to be honest about that. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, then be sure to like it and subscribe to my channel because it really helps me out, and follow me on Twitter. I'm going to try and post more Doctor Who reactions as the series goes on, not to mention other videos as well. See you soon!